This title that I've chosen, I hope will become sensible as we talk. The basic idea is that we want to, instead of bringing our view of the world and trying to impose it into the students, imagine starting where the students are and then guiding them to constructing outward the way we see the world. So that's the general plan. What can a final session like this accomplish? There were many great projects reported. The workshops generated a great deal of wonderful ideas. I get the privilege of being sort of bookends. I did workshop Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning and now Friday afternoon. Many of the sessions that we've all heard were, as we say in America, preaching to the choir, basically saying things to people who already agree with you. Carmel kept asking for contentious comments and just couldn't get any. I'm not sure that I will be adding anything wholly new, but I would like to suggest I'll try to organize what I've been hearing this week. I had my own ideas before I came, but on top of that, what I've tried to do is add in things that I've observed or heard. I'll try to identify connections between the new ideas and our implicit model of what our new students are like. And I'm going to suggest sort of three big take-home points from this summary/organizer. First, what are the distinctive qualities of students today? What are their assets and liabilities? I was very taken with what Professor Daphne Pan said this morning about how many of these properties are things that have always been there. These are not necessarily new. We notice them now. A second point is that instruction needs to begin where the students are. It's relevant to the content and the process of their lives and developmentally appropriate. Too often we begin our work by offering students abstractions or expecting intellectual skills that they're not ready for. There are many models of intellectual development. A speaker this morning referred to Vygotsky in the zone of proximal development. If you like EduBabble, you can use that one. And then third, we need to design activities and assignments to match what is already in our students. Begin there. We can work in the course of a single module or over their career to having them think more like us, but we need to remember to start where they are. There's a great term that I first encountered in an anthropology class called experience near constructs. And we need to remember to have our constructs be close to the experience of our students, not necessarily close to the experience of an academic journal. So with that overview, the first thing we did in the two workshops this week was sort of fun. I said to people, what are your students like? Right? What are they? And we used piles of sticky notes, and people wrote stuff, and we put them up on the board. And we made a list. Now, this is very different from the list that Carmel used. It's different from the list that Daphne used because it's not drawn from a research literature. Though several people pointed out some of those are not drawn from research. They're just sort of thought exercises. But these were the experiences of our colleagues here in the conference. And it seemed that those, if that's what they see in their students, we need to build our instruction from that construction. We sorted the list into clusters to try to make some, there were 40 or so little sticky notes, but we narrowed it down, and I've clustered them into 8 clusters. Recognizing that some of these are assets. Many of my colleagues at KU refer to the characteristics of today's students in a somewhat negative tone. They don't see this as a huge advantage. But there are many assets in that set of characteristics, and some are simply not new. And so I'm going to run through the list, and these are the ones that we came up with. That students typically have an affinity for technology. They're comfortable with it, they prefer to use mediated communication, and they're quite adept at using established programs. I think Daphne also pointed out they're not necessarily good at everything about technology, but they certainly choose it as a medium. Second, very connected with others. Frequent contact through media, socializing online, and socializing in large groups. I'm astounded at the effect that Facebook has had on the continuation of friendships. people who are on Facebook are still in touch with people they knew 5, 10, 20 years ago in ways that unlike what my experience has been. Task-oriented and efficient. Again, these are the things that came out of our group. Focused on outcomes like grades, focused on you give me a project, tell me what the right answer is, and I'll go do it. They want products done, however, without a lot of extra work. If there's a shortcut, if there's a clear path, they want you to tell them about it. They're not interested in the endless exploration, the kind of learning by errors that many of us think is the best way to learn. They're very driven by personal meaning and motivation. They will work very hard at something they care about and be quite disinterested and casual about not doing things that are just, oh, you should do this because it's good for you. They're reluctant to follow requests for work, and they work best, as do most of us, with intrinsic motivation. I chose the word flexible to describe attention. It is flexible in lots of ways. One way is that these are people who can mix multiple tasks in series. Note that I'm wearing my experimental psychology hat. The evidence is very clear. Multitasking does not exist. It is very fast switching in a series of tasks. But people think that they are multitasking, and that's what happens. They prefer shorter work over a sustained single effort, will choose away from work that's too linear or too repetitive. And so as we design our classes, we want to keep that in mind. And multimodal learning is easy. As you can mix up the learning. You can lecture for 20 minutes and then show a video and then have them in groups, all within one 50-minute class period. They're fine with that. There's flexibility there. A visual orientation. The power of making images is incredible. The existence of YouTube and the billions of hours of video that are out there. Graphic representations carry impact, and communication with images is quite preferred. Focus on a near-term horizon. These are not people to whom you can say, look, 3 years from now, you'll think today's lecture was really important. That's not a meaningful or winning argument. They are unwilling to do uninteresting work for long times, and personal outcomes, things that mean something to me, and I get an outcome right now, carry a great deal of impact. And this one runs slightly contrary to the conversation about integrity, but many of the people in the room and many of my colleagues in the University of Kansas have great faith in this next generation. They feel they're very committed to personal values, to justice, and that they see them as highly idealistic, while at the same time, according to the data we heard this morning, over half of them are plagiarizing. So, this is the list. Again, I'm not arguing that this is a research-based list. I haven't been out there observing the behavior of 18 to 22-year-olds for 5 years and keeping track of what they do. But these were the things that were salient to many of us in the room who got together early in the week to talk about today's students. And so what I want to do is now talk about different ways of building instruction that take advantage of those things. That when possible, treat them as assets, or when they're liabilities, teach in a way that avoids running into them. So this is what's in our students. Let's see how we can get them to perhaps over time come to think a little bit the way we want them to as a goal. And I'm gonna suggest that there are many paths. This has been a wonderfully rich conference. I've enjoyed many sessions hearing new ideas that I've written down that I'll carry home. But there are sort of 4 areas where I think this notion of connecting to students can be very fruitful. And that's in appealing ways that they can express themselves, things that are natural to them, being active in the construction of understanding, connecting to personal experiences. If it's something that's meaningful in my life, I'll give you my time and energy. And then bringing our disciplines, our academic way of thinking into the community outside the university. So we'll start with this one. What are ways that our students like to tell us things? And I'm going to describe an example. This is from a professor who was at KU. She's now in Hawaii, Ayu Saraswati. She wanted her students to explore their own socialization of gender. This was a course in women and gender studies. And she had heard a presentation about digital stories. And if you've been around the last 2 days, so have you. Digital stories are very much in the wind. And so in her course, she gave them the opportunity to do study in her academic field, but to, instead of producing a term paper, produce a narrative video. And the target length was around 8 minutes. By the way, this URL here at the bottom is live, and some of you I know are having mobile devices. I've been seeing them all. Feel free to log in. I would love it if you, while we're doing the rest of this, you read that, you have questions, you want to comment on it. That would be a very useful thing. On that site, she presents the results. You can log into the YouTube sites where her student work is. She'll tell you what she thought of it. And she's also written very powerfully about what her real goal was to get them to theorize their own lives. Not just to tell us, a narcissistic story, but after they've made this, or through the making of this video, they'll come to recognize their own lives as examples of the theoretical constructions that are her purpose in teaching the course. So this way of expressing is a hook or a portal, not necessarily an end in itself. Some of us heard Ramona Tong from NIE describe her work on this. I thought it was really, really good. In the workshop, the other thing, after we listed all of the, what are the characteristics, the end point of the day was for people to come up with their most likely to actually use idea. And I told them that I wanted to harvest them, and I have them here. By far, the most popular idea from the whole workshop that people took was this notion of a digital story. 2/3 of the papers I got at the end of our little class were on digital stories, which I think also reflects the way in which most of us, when we think of the new generation, think first of tech savvy. That's if there's one characteristic that got mentioned more than that. I just wanted to mention a few to give you some idea of the variety of ideas. Priscilla Pui wanted to have a video of a teen research project. And her expression was she wanted to appeal to the photo me generation. Teofilo D'Aquila was doing a video of group work. That's in a course in Southeast Asian economics. John Waiduyo used a video as a formative activity, that when he was having students having trouble, he would make a video to explain something, and he thought I could transfer that to the students. If they did that work, then they would have each other as an audience. The work would become more authentic, not for him, but for each other. That's actually a very common idea. There's a hugely funded digital story project in the United States, and after these students did the work, a center went out and made a film of those students, interviewing them about what it was like to do the digital stories. And I've seen this film. Of the 20 interviews, not one of those students ever mentions the professor in describing his or her work. In each case, there was some other authentic audience. So there's something very powerful, but when you make a video, you'd show it to your friends. You write a term paper, you don't put it on your Facebook page. Lee Hong-sung was interested in a video in finance problems, shaping work with peers and becoming aware of audience. Ko Hui-ling is in comparative and alternative medicine, and the idea there was to replace a poster with a short video for two reasons. One is it would have peers as an audience, and second, if they were good, they could be used in community settings. So the potential of a second audience. A bunch of people also, we read another piece on debates, combined the idea that students like arguing. They like oral debates with each other, and combining that with video. Amanda Nixon, a lecturer on social work and community welfare, was very interested in that, particularly as it relates to ethical concerns. Jaya Singh, again, role-playing and debate in ethical matters. So there were many, many of these that I found fascinating, and I just wanted to mention that I thought that it was really good that our colleagues quickly saw the power of connecting to our students' visual interest in articulation. So among the affinities, the digital affinity, the visual representation, and peers as an authentic audience. These are characteristics of our students that are assets, and many of our colleagues here can imagine with students who will take a video at every restaurant they go to and then send it to all their friends within 10 minutes, they can probably put together something that would express their understanding of a course. The second path, I think, is one that we've heard about. It's actually not new. Several people have cited, the 20-year-old stuff on the 7 characteristics of good teaching. It always includes active learning. So active construction of understanding. This is a story about a history professor who read a book called Historical Thinking, and she decided she was going to have her lower division students think like an historian, which means not just tell the sequence of events, but understand what it means to interpret, to explain, to make meaning out of a series of historical events. And so she taught the course that way, and then when she got the course evaluations, it was one of the lowest hours of her life. The students hated it, and her. And so she was very, very discouraged and couldn't figure out, well, gee, here I'm offering them a high-level view, not rote memorization. And one of the students in an open-ended comment said, your job is to teach us the stuff. Well, the stuff of history is a sequence of events. And the students brought to the learning their view that that's what history is. And she wanted to change that into history being an act of constructing meaning. Again, here's her essay is on this site, which is live, and you could go read the essay. She decided that she would have the students spend the first 3 weeks of class constructing a wiki representation of all the stuff, all the events. She gave them a pile of text, she gave them some online resources, and they did nothing for the first 3 weeks of the semester except work together in teams, putting together all the stuff for the course. They created, if you will, the text which they would interpret for the rest of the semester. And then, after they had done all that work, and all the bonding and collaborative work that goes with it, they were suddenly interested in trying to interpret the stuff they had created. Whereas when she just said, I'd like you to do it without their participation, it didn't work. So by connecting early, she gave them something that was valuable to them because it was going to be on a test, and they got it early, they didn't have to wait for it, and they constructed it collaboratively and electronically. So she played into all their strengths right from the front of the course and had their sympathy when she wanted them to do other stuff. The students wanted from her clarity, a task they could do. They didn't warm up to ambiguity or some abstract idea like interpretation. She responded to their needs, and in return, she accomplished her own goals. Because by the end of the course, they were, in fact, very happily writing interpretations and making meaning out of the stuff. I want to describe some similar things I've done in my own course using off-the-shelf technology. I'm not a computer programmer, and I don't have the time and energy to learn very complicated stuff, though I'm going to look into Symbaloo. Kritika's been telling me about that, and the paper I heard today or yesterday on Symbaloo was very, very good. I use collaborative writing. I have the students do something like what Shada does. They create a repository of research that they've done in the library. I have them work in blogs. I use a poster tool from the Carnegie Foundation for them to reflect on their meaning, not to just repeat what they're learning, but to write about what it means in their own lives. I give tiny bits of course credit for this. These are not assessments. These are learning activities. Okay, I'm not going to go read them in order to find out what they understand. I do that in the usual ways. I use exams and papers and an oral conversation with each student. One idea is I give them a prior exam and prior student work with the permission of those former students, and I say, tell me what you think of it. And so in learning teams of 5, they sit around and they read these answers, and then they argue with each other about what's the best answer. I never tell them what I think. They're constructing their idea of what's excellence in their peers' work. And when the peers give me these answers, I consider it like organ donation. You're giving up something that's maybe a little diseased, but somebody else can use it. These reflective postings. I ask them to not just repeat what you would do on a test, but tell me how it connects to your life. Tell me how your ideas have changed since the beginning of the course. This kind of metacognitive reflection, I will admit, 10 years ago I thought was hooey. I mean, when people start talking about this, I say, please. I now use this in my courses, and I find, and I'll show you in a minute, that it has very powerful positive effects. This is an example of their collaborative repository where they collect evidence, and then later each of them will write a paper based on that shared evidence. But they work together socially, electronically. I have class time where the learning teams are together, and they also work outside of class. That's the blended idea. I mentioned that I have this interview at the end of the semester. I sit down with every student for 20 minutes, and we have a conversation on 5 topics, the 5 key topics in the course. I make a videotape of it, and then I have a very detailed rubric. If you like rubrics, you'd love this stuff, with 4 categories. Really doesn't know anything, kind of threshold, pretty good, and then quite advanced. And I follow that rubric, and I score each student on each of the 5 categories. And this was the data from 2007. And you can see I had almost a third of the class over here not doing well. These are people who are passing the tests, but when we're in a live conversation where they fluently talk to me about it, they just don't do it. And then I added all this stuff, the reflective stuff, the collaborative writing. And this is what happened. The clueless disappeared. And I started getting some people very good, and everybody shifted up into a much better range. And this is why I decided metacognition and reflective and those kind of blog sort of things are actually quite good. They do, in fact, motivate learning. Even if I'm not in there grading it, I'm not measuring it, I just note that it's there. I pop in. I think it was Brian Leong who was saying yesterday about how do you deal with the flow of blogs. I thought he was very wise. They know I'm there. They don't expect me to respond every time. I often quote them in class. I'll often put them up on the screen. But I don't grade them. They're their space. That's where they're doing their learning. So what I think is going on here is we're using ways in which students answer their own questions. Their natural form of discourse. Those are the things they like doing. I was quite taken with the talk yesterday by Brad Blackstone and Ho Jia. They use blogs in language and communication courses in very nice ways, very different ways. Each of us could use it in a different way, but it's a way to get students engaged with each other and with the material. There were, actually, no, I'm going to skip that. What are their strengths? They like structured tasks. They like socially constructed products. These are things that have a near-term result. They get something out of it right away. They don't have to wait till the next semester or the next class to realize it. And their flexible attention is well suited to multiple tasks. I give them lots of different things to do. We'll often do 3 or 4 different things in a 50-minute class period. Just FYI, in a typical semester, my lecture time is somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes over the whole semester. I used to lecture all semester like most of my colleagues. But gradually, these other activities have just replaced it. Connecting to personal experience. The buzzword I'll use for this is inductive learning. And I'm the last, many people have written about this for many years. This course that I teach is called Conceptual Issues in Psychology. It covers, cool stuff like free will and determinism, whether we can read our own minds, is psychology a science, and stuff like that. And I'm going to focus on what I do with free will and determinism. The first day of class, we spend the entire class. I hand out a paper syllabus, but then we talk about a case in North Carolina in which a man who had killed 2 people on the street was in a mental hospital under the criminal law. He sued his psychiatrist and got $500,000 from a jury. So he's in confinement, he's a murderer, and a jury gives him $500,000. All right? We spend that entire class talking about that, or they do. I ask them, what do you think? And I ask them sort of questions like this. Do you think he belongs in jail? Why or why not? When does the legal system conclude that the behavior should not be punished? What characteristics would you look for in behavior that's considered inappropriate to be punished? They just spend the whole, and it doesn't take anything. There's a debate. I mean, there's somebody in the room who thinks this guy should be executed, and there's somebody who thinks the psychiatrist, should have given him $1 million for screwing up his medications. Right? And they're naive. They're not sophisticated in this. They're just regular people who care about crime and punishment and responsibility and freedom. And that's how we get started. Then the next class period, this is his wife, okay, as are this and this. We read about a polygamous community in the American West, in which the author of the article, it's a chapter in a very good trade book, poses the question, can a 13-year-old be said to be making a free choice to marry Uncle Rulo? Right? Is that a possibility? I don't have to do anything. I mean, they're all over this, and I'm astounded every year at how many students believe that person, that 13-year-old, could be making a free will choice to marry that guy. The chapter is actually kind of cool. It's about two sisters. The one sister who marries, and the other who escapes and is beaten up and brought back, and then escapes again. Freedom means a lot of things. We have them, listen to the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech. Not known around the world, but famous in the United States. He uses the term freedom a lot. I get him to think about what that means. Wait a minute, Dan, isn't this a psychology class? They read a novel or a chapter out of a novel of coming of age of a college student who's conforming. They see a movie of a play in which college students are conforming to their romantic partners. It's all to get them thinking in their own ways about what it means to be free, to make a choice. And then finally we get to this guy, B.F. Skinner, who is in a debate with Carl Rogers, one of the great humanistic psychotherapists of the 20th century. And they are in Science magazine, which is, with Nature, one of the top magazines in the world, debating the control of human behavior and free will. Now that's the psychology part. By the time they get there, they're actually interested in that debate, and it's 50 years old. It's not current, it's not relevant. It's two high-powered intellectuals on nuances of a key point. So that's the sort of model I have for working from within. I start with examples I know they're going to care about. We get to the discussion of theory, and then it loops back because the way I measure their understanding is I give them problem-based exams, or I give them say, analyze the current policy on privatization of retirement and Social Security from the point of view of free will and determinism, that sort of thing. Many of you may have heard Richard Felder when he was here last year. He's very well known for writing on this subject, inductive learning. Basically, you connect with personal knowledge, use a lot of examples, work from the specific to the abstract, rather than start by giving the abstractions, give the research that supports it, and then if there's time, I'll tell you how to apply it. Inductive approaches, there were a couple good ones in the workshop. Lo I Ho had students look at their mobile devices and say, so how does that work? What's in there? What is it? And had them work from a particular toward general principles. Peter Loca is having inductive medical stuff, using newspaper articles on medical conditions to start conversations with students. Students are motivated by personal interest. They prefer immediately useful thinking, and they want to know how the ideas affect them. I can get students to talk about something philosophical like the mind-body problem. To what degree is there a mind separate from nerves and electrical energy and chemicals? Because I don't start with that. I don't start with Descartes. Descartes comes at the end. So I just think this is a very, very powerful tool. Again, it builds on the strengths of our students. If you can make it relevant to them, they're with you. They'll stay with you. And they'll go all the way to something that's what a psychologist would care about. And then the last thing I want to mention is bringing the discipline to the community. Another KU colleague, Ann Cudd, is a philosophy professor. She was teaching a course in feminist philosophy, which is, like all philosophy, kind of hard going. Even a quote applied philosophy like feminist philosophy still has a great deal of logic and text and thinking. And so she says in her essay that she envied theater directors and athletic coaches, because the students would work very hard for them and stiff their academic classes in order to spend time on that. She said, what are they doing that I'm not doing? Why aren't they stiffing their theater rehearsals because they're reading philosophy? Well, at some level, that's a ridiculous statement, but she had a good challenge. This is her live URL if you wanted to be reading what she did. And she said, I'm going to send these kids out into the community, into places where women's lives and gender issues are very powerful. And the three that she chose were a daycare center, a battered women's shelter, a shelter for women who are victims of domestic violence, and a community center where identity and gender are worked out through in a diverse sort of way. Now, the students didn't just go, help out and, wash dishes or something. They were giving their services and their time, which is good for the community and builds character, but they were also writing about how those experiences were related to the abstractions that they were reading in the philosophy literature. So she motivated their willingness to read the hard stuff by having them situate it in real events that were relevant to the lives of women. These students, by the way, did digital projects. She didn't have them, write regular term papers. They tried to connect. They highlighted the connection between the philosophy and the stuff they were seeing. They built models of domestic violence that was very sophisticated. And then wrote powerfully, to me, I felt, about identity and what identity is and how gender and identity are connected. Another example, a colleague of mine who's a Spanish professor, he had his students translating for non-English speaking Hispanic residents and used that as a link into culture, Spanish language culture. He also has examples of student work. He shows you the criteria. And if you read Spanish, you could be second-guessing his grading. So this connects with student qualities because they do care about social justice. They do care about community. To them, helping is important. Is there a natural medium of expression? Yeah, I think they like making those digital projects. Again, I know several of those students who showed those digital, who sent that URL to their friends and to their family, saying, this is what I'm doing in college. Again, I don't think Anne used to have her kids sending their philosophy papers home. There were a couple of really nice examples that came out of the workshop, which I wanted to share. One person who remained anonymous wanted to have, this must be medical or nursing students, interview people in hospitals and community centers to see whether there was something about their profile that would suggest enhanced medical care. Ethan Buse who's in philosophy of art, had her students, or was proposing to have her students design a Zen garden for a space that could use a garden, because in order to design a Zen garden, you'd have to understand Zen. And so they would be wanting to create this as a gift to the community, but in the process, they would learn about the ideas behind it. And then Lo Ai Po also, again, runs a service trip that takes students to India to study the needs of communication and cyber infrastructure. So it's really, I mention these workshop examples to show you don't have to be somebody who's going to give up the rest of your life. You can pick something small and quick and work it in, just paying attention to what your students might find useful. Again, I think my colleagues believe that while students may not be ethical in every way, they are committed to an idealism. That when you connect to that, it's a personal motivation. They'll work for that in a way they won't work for just a grade. The tasks are very well structured. When you go to a service learning opportunity, there's things to do. They tell you what to do. It doesn't, you don't have to figure it out. It's very, very social. It connects with people, and the students always report meeting people who become real friends beyond the life of the course. So I'm going to return to the 3 take-home points. We'll see if they make any more sense the second time around. There are distinctive qualities of our students. They are, many of them, great assets if we know how to approach them. Some are new and some are just, they're human young people, and that's what human young people are like. Short-term horizon, make it easy for me, and it's all about me. Instruction starts where the students are, right? It needs to be relevant to the content and process of their lives. You need to start by asking them to do things they already know how to do. In one form of psychology, the Skinner form of psychology, there's an expression, you'll never change behavior with a reinforcer you don't deliver. If you ask people to do things they're not capable of before you encourage them, you won't have much of an impact. Start where they are. And then design assignments to match what's already there. Think carefully. What am I doing? How am I using their time? How does it connect to the world as they know it? And then gradually over the course of a semester, the way Sheda Jahanbani did, you get them on board, you get them to buy into what you're doing, and then you can stretch. But by starting where they are, you have a much better chance that they'll buy into the hard stuff, the stuff that is the intellectual equivalent of eating your vegetables. So my take home, for you is, I think this is a great time to be a teacher with these students in this terribly mixed up, odd world that we live in. That these are students who are highly motivated if you can connect to their motivations. We can connect to their skills, and I think that the result would be a great deal of new energy among our students and in the work they're doing. And with that, I thank you, and I am ready for your comments or questions or observations.